Pennsylvanians made up over 360,000 total men in the Union Army during the American Civil War. This is second only to the state of New York. In order to maintain this massive flow of recruits, a giant infrastructure of tents and wagons were needed. Places across the Keystone State, such as Camp Curtin, Camp Cadwalader, Camp Union, Camp Scott, and Camp William Penn, allowed for this organization and drill of new regiments upon its grounds. While the majority of these camps are located nearby Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, York, Easton, as well as many other urban areas across the state of Pennsylvania, there stood only one in the northeast corner of the state, that being Camp Luzerne. Hello, my name is Garrett Kost. I am a senior at Gettysburg College and a fellow at the Civil War Institute, and I am standing here at the corner of Kelly and Bennett Streets in the borough of Luzerne, Pennsylvania. This is just outside of Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And although this area looks rather residential today, this at one time was a massive infrastructure of military tents, wagons, and new recruits hustling about in one of the initial training camps here in the Keystone State. With that being said, although the coal counties of the northeastern region of Pennsylvania are typically known for being awash with copperhead activity, there was varying emotions in Luzerne County in particular. On one hand, we saw a large majority of the Luzerne County citizens backing the Union cause, backing the Union during the American Civil War. And then on the other hand, we do see this large Copperhead movement, both anti-war and anti-abolition. But the majority of Luzerne County citizens were extremely pro-Union, pro-war. So therefore, in 1861, with the initial raising of volunteers, a large majority of Luzerne County citizens did offer up their services in 3 out of 11 total 9-month regiments. Such colorful militia companies from Wilkes-Barre and the area surrounding it helped to compose these, such as the Wyoming Artillerists, Hoyt's Jaegers, and the Brookville Rifles. Indeed, and actually 1861 in total, instead of the allotted 14 regiments that Pennsylvania was supposed to raise, Pennsylvania actually raised a total of 39 regiments, each of them numbering about 1,000 men. 12 of these regiments in total were actually raised in Luzerne County, and many, many more throughout the entirety of the war. Most notably, some of these regiments are the 7th, the 28th, the 52nd, 56th, 61st, 76th, 81st, 96th, 132nd, and the 143rd Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry Regiments. Along with these units of infantry, there are also most notably 2 units of cavalry as well, the 4th and the 9th. Each one of these units had a long history in the Union Army during the American Civil War. Whether these units fought at Vicksburg, or Gettysburg, or Antietam, Chancellorsville, or even the assault on Battery Wagner, Luzerne County soldiers helped to play a major part in not only just the Pennsylvania regiments, but the Union Army during the American Civil War. With that being said, by mid-1862, Governor Andrew Curtin, the governor of Pennsylvania, was feeling a massive strain on its initial training camps at Camp Curtin, just outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So he actually ordered out petitions to local mayors of well-known Pennsylvania towns to open up their towns and areas surrounding for initial training camps. So by May 1862, the mayor of Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, petitioned Governor Andrew Curtin and likewise won an ability to have a training camp located in that northeast corner of the state. On July 29th, there was a property that was actually set out. This property was owned by a combination of the Peck and the Bennett families in Luzerne Borough, just outside of Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and this was initially a logging camp, so the area had already been cut clear from most of the trees and foliage around the area. Likewise, most of this area on this side of Wilkes-Barre had not yet been developed by the large anthracite coal mine industry that had been taking over the other side of the Wyoming Valley. But nonetheless, on July 29th, the infrastructure of the camp started to come to fruition. Tents, company streets, latrines, cookhouses, administrative areas, as well as supply depots were set up on this very spot in order to maintain these large flow of recruits. With that being said, although this massive intake of supply was needed for the camp, there had only been simply one regiment that was trained here at Camp Luzerne, due to the incoming strikes of 1862 and 1863 that plagued the coal counties of Pennsylvania. But that being said, the 143rd Pennsylvania had the honor of training here at Camp Luzerne, with the first companies of which arriving on August 25th, 1862, from the city of Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. One of these soldiers that arrived first was a man by the name of Private Avery Harris. He was a bookkeeper for a railroad station in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and he kept a detailed diary of his experiences here at Camp Luzerne, as well as during the American Civil War in general. One of the first things of note that not only Private Harris wrote about, but the other soldiers of the 143rd Pennsylvania wrote about was the tents, indeed. These large tents often slept a number of soldiers, so that way they can keep as many soldiers as possible within these camps. Private Avery Harris wrote about the jokes these soldiers used to play on each other, saying, "Often in the dead of the dark hours of the night, when the camp was wrapped in profound slumber, some good-natured devil would remove the tent from its current occupant and place it in the middle of the company streets. When the trick was discovered, the entire camp would be aroused by the sudden and profane screaming of its victims." Although these jokes were not necessarily well tolerated within these camps, camp life here at Camp Luzerne was not necessarily all fun and games. Instead, Avery Harris writes that every single morning they were awoken at about 5 o'clock to begin their long day of drills. Their first out of 5 different drill iterations began approximately at 6 o'clock in the morning after receiving breakfast and having roll call done by their company first sergeant. With that being said, however, the companies of the 143rd Pennsylvania were drilled heavily on company, battalion, and regimental drill. Now, unfortunately, these soldiers did not have most of their accoutrements, a lot of their leather cartridge boxes, their cap boxes and belts, but and neither would they have their rifles either. All of these would be waiting for them at Camp Curtin when they first decided to come to the front as soon as their training had been complete. With that being said, however, these men did have a long and hard training here at Camp Luzerne. But after their day was complete and after their training for the day is over, these soldiers would have a chance to sit down and relax. They would oftentimes write to their loved ones, or they would read books, or play music, or play dice, or card games with each other. But instead, a lot of these soldiers chose to indulge in creature comforts. A lot of these creature comforts were brought to them by the courtesy of what's known as company sutlers or regimental sutlers. These sutlers are locals from the area who are actually choosing to come and sell their wares at these military camps. Indeed, there were 2 separate sutlers that were seen at Camp Luzerne. And Private Harris actually writes about this interaction very, very keenly. He writes that there were 2 separate sutlers, and they began to become in direct competition with each other. One day, some of these soldiers that preferred one sutler came and actually attacked the other sutler, whereas soldiers that supported the other sutler came and attacked the opposite sutler, basically ensuing in a massive brawl that overtook the camp. Now, unfortunately to this, the colonel of the regiment, Colonel Dana, ended up making a decree that actually outlawed any citizens to actually come into the camp and either sell wares or visit any other soldiers. With that being said, however, by November 7th, the regiment was ready to step off and get set towards the front. So on November 7th, at about 5 o'clock in the morning, these soldiers woke up to a large storm of snow and rain and sleet. And as the bugle sounded and the drums started to begin to play, the regiment marched off from this location all the way down to Kingston, Pennsylvania, on the other side of Wilkes-Barre, and began to board cattle trains to be bound for the front. They first stopped at Camp Curtin to receive their rifles and their accoutrements, and then they were sent off to Fort Slocum around Washington, D.C. for the Civil War defenses of Washington. It was there they would stand for only about a month or so as the numbers began to dwindle in the Army of the Potomac due to the 7 Days Campaign and the battles of Antietam and Fredericksburg, to the point where the 143rd Pennsylvania would then be transferred to the 1st Army Corps of the Union Army of the Potomac. That being said, the 143rd Pennsylvania would have its first site of action at the Battle of Chancellorsville, then again at the Battle of Fredericksburg, where its young 18-year-old Color Sergeant Benjamin Crippen would famously shake his fist in the face of the enemy on the very first day of the Battle of Gettysburg. But that being said, the history of the 143rd Pennsylvania does not necessarily end at the Battle of Gettysburg, but rather throughout the entirety of the war. But this history of this regiment all comes back to its origins here at the site of Camp Luzerne.